Man, I'm excited to bring God's Word today. We're wrapping up our series called I'm Not Okay, and I am okay with that. It's been a long couple of weeks, actually 2 months that we've been in this series, and really we've just gone through a lot of different things, a lot of different conversations, and here's the truth that I think that we kind of landed on is that every one of us are not okay. There's all something that we're dealing with, something in our soul or something in ourselves, our minds, that needs to get better. But I think this is what a lot of us have also discovered is I'm not who I used to be. I'm not where I used to be. I have moved forward, but I still got some more work to do. Has anyone else that's kind of where you kind of sit with this whole conversation? How many of you say I'm not where I used to be? How many of you say I'm moving forward? Come on, I'm not okay, but that's okay. I'm going to get better. And what we've really seen God do some miraculous things in marriages and in people's lives. People have had honest conversations. We've had some great small groups already just talking about where we are in life and starting to build community and support. And so I'm excited to kind of wrap this up today. But when I was planning out this series, this was actually the first message I knew we would end up with this, because this is a message that's really dear to my heart. It's part of my story, just like kind of last week was. And so I'm excited to bring this in. We're going to look at the life of Moses in Exodus chapter 3 and 4. But before we jump into that, I'm excited to kind of wrap this up, tell you about the next couple weeks. We're gearing up towards Easter, and so lots of great things with that. I don't know if you've seen this yet or not, but we got a Saturday night service we're doing this year, which is awesome. So we got a Saturday night at 6 p.m. and then 2 on the Sunday morning, 9 and 10:30, just like normal. And so RSVP, we did this at Christmas. That helps us to know where we're at as far as seating. At Christmas time, it was great because it looked like through RSVPs, which you guys did a great job at that we were going to have 2 packed services. And that's exactly what ended up happening. I mean, we were packed to capacity, but we got it done in 2. And so we want to know that 3, that's enough. And we want to know that which ones we want to be able to communicate to you and say, hey, the 10:30 is getting full. You better sign up, those kind of things. So it's really, I know it's one of those things. It's like for your convenience, the bathroom's under construction. It's have you ever seen those signs? It's like, no, that's not for my convenience. I need to use the bathroom. Let me in. And so it's kind of one of those things. For your convenience, we'd like for you to go RSVP. But really it is to make sure that you know that you've got a seat and your family can take care of it. I know we're a month out, but we're really excited about Easter. As we're, this week, our family, we kind of have some normal things that we do. And one is at the beginning of the week, we talk about what do we have to eat. We look in the refrigerator, a family of 6. I got 4 kids, a 17-year-old, a 15-year-old, a 9-year-old, and a 5-year-old. And so that's a common conversation, either on the way home from church or on the way home from work. I'll call my wife and say, what do we have to eat? Anyone else do that? Like, hey, before I come home, do I need to stop and get something? Pizza, is that pizza night again? Like, what are we doing here? And so we always run out of the same things. We always run out of milk, eggs, bread. Those things are always going missing in our house. I think our kids just drink like gallons of milk per day. We'll literally go through, if everyone has a bowl of cereal, 1 gallon of milk is done. I mean, our kids just throw down some food. And so it's a common thing for us to talk about grocery shopping and to go do that. But we don't, because our kids are big and eat a lot of food, we don't grocery shop at Target or Dillon's like any of you bougie people out here. We got to go to Sam's Club and get the flat cart. And that's what we got to do. Like, you guys buy 5 oranges, I need 40. You know, that's kind of how it goes. And so we go to Sam's, I load up all the stuff, I get home. This just a couple weeks ago, back end is full, and when we do this at our house, it's all hands on deck. So it doesn't matter what you're doing in the house, like doesn't matter how old, big kids, little kids, everyone's coming out, everyone gets something and bring it in. And my older boys, they're teenagers and they're becoming men, and as a man should, the goal is to how can we get this all in one trip, right? It's like I want to stack the bags up on the arms. I have no circulation in my left pinky, but it's okay because I got all the groceries in one trip. Any men, that's a manly thing to do, right? I'm not making 2 trips. I got it, babe. Go inside. Load it up. So my boys, they'll stack up stuff and, smash bread and all those kind of things. And so they'll go in, but I got Abel, our 5-year-old. I said, hey, you need to come out and help too. And he's like, okay. So he comes out and he's got like a juice box or something in his hand. And I tell him, I said, hey, you need to put that down, and I want you to carry these bananas in the house. And I thought at first I heard him say, I can't, my hands are full. But I was like, it sounded weird. And so I said, Abel, what did you say? Because, kids talking, you're kind of halfway listening sometimes. He goes, I can't, Dad. I don't have enough hands. It was his excuse, the cutest little excuse ever. And so I was like, I don't care. Grow some hands. Put that down. Carry those inside. We're all helping. And so, but he says that often all the time. Like, Abel, you need to get your backpack, bring it. I don't have enough hands. It's a cute little excuse. This is something I've recognized. It doesn't matter how old or how young you are. Excuses become part of our lives. They're part of the things that we do. In fact, if there's anything that we don't want to do, it is not hard to find an excuse. They're nearby. They're always close. They're in our pocket. They're on the back of our mind, on the tip of our tongue. In fact, we just had Super Bowl Sunday. Go Chiefs. Yeah, come on, somebody. And so a couple of you, only a few of you are Chiefs fans. That's weird. And so Super Bowl Sunday, great time. But they actually have something. It's actually the most called into work day of the year. And they actually call it Super Sick Monday. Because some of you guys call in sick on Monday because you were having too much fun on Sunday. And so we have an excuse like, I'm not feeling good. No, you're just hungover. It's what it is. Okay, let's just be honest. Put down the beer, drink a root beer, go to work on Monday. Let's go. But there's excuses and that's part of our life. And I grew up with my dad's a mechanic, and so I grew up working with him in high school. And I remember there was a guy that worked with him, and mechanics have a way of saying things that aren't always real PG. And so he had this statement about excuses, and I'm not going to use it this morning because my wife told me I couldn't. But I'm going to give you a different quote, okay? So I can't use the mechanic's quote about excuses, but some of you heard it and you already know it. You're thinking about it. I'm going to give you one from Benjamin Franklin, okay? Here's the great Benjamin Franklin. He that is good for making excuses is seldom good for anything else. And so one of the best excuse makers in the Bible is Moses. He's a hero of our faith. He did some incredible things, but man, he had some excuses. And that's what we're going to look at today, is Exodus chapter 4. And we're going to look at the excuses, 4 excuses, in fact, that Moses had. We have, I think, sometimes 4 excuses on why we can't serve or lead. Moses had 4 excuses, but I think as we look at this, we're going to find some parallels that some of these sound familiar. And in fact, there's some of these that I've used with God. There's some of these that personally have been on the tip of my tongue, the back of my brain, in my pocket, ready when God asks me to do something. And so we're going to look at the life of Moses, but I think what we're going to see is that there's some parallels in our own lives. And we've established this in our series, that we're not okay. But I think here's a problematic approach with that, is that understanding, that knowing of being I'm not okay, actually keeps us from walking in the plans and purposes and calling of God. Like we recognize, we look in the mirror and go, I'm not okay. I got some stuff I need to work on. And that causes us to halt in our walk with the Father. It causes us to slow down, to stop, instead of being used and being purposed and making a difference with God. And so in Exodus chapter 3, Moses, he had this incredible youth and growing up, but he ended up murdering someone and gets kind of ran out of town. He's an outlaw. So for 40 years, he's been hanging out, avoiding Egypt and avoiding his mistake. And he's out there and he's raising these sheep. He's living a farmer life. He's got a wife. He's working for his father-in-law. He's got a quaint little house on the prairie thing going on. Like, I'm just out here and I'm just doing my thing and it's all good. And one day while he's out there working the sheep, all of a sudden he stumbles upon a bush that's burning, but it's unique because even though it's engulfed in flames, nothing is falling off of it. Nothing is burning up. It's just burning but not burning. And so he stops, he's looking at it, and as he's looking at this miraculous thing, all of a sudden the voice of God speaks out to him. And God quickly proves that he is God. That this is not a mirage. You're not seeing things, Moses. This is the voice of God. And as Moses has this encounter, he kind of turns his face because he realizes he's in the very presence of God. And in fact, God tells him to do this, is take off your shoes, take off your sandals. You're standing on holy ground. And so Moses is in this unique place where he's actually in the presence of God, and God is talking to him. And God, in his conversation, lets Moses know, hey, I know what my people have been going through. I know that for over 400 years they've been in captivity. I know for over 400 years they've been oppressed, that they've been in slavery. I know that. And a time has come for their deliverance. And Moses, I'm sure, was like, yes, Lord, do it. I'm sure he's amening him. Come on, preach. You're doing a good job, God. And then God, the conversation kind of goes from a declaration, and it goes from a declaration to a calling. Moses, this is what I'm going to do, but actually I need you to play a part. And the conversation gets very real and very vulnerable and very authentic between Moses and God. And I think that for us, this gives us some great perspective, because I think for some of us, we need to confront these mindsets or these excuses that maybe are keeping us from stepping out and stepping into the purposes of God in our lives. So Moses, here he is. I'm going to give you the first excuse. In Exodus chapter 3, verse 10, God calls out to Moses, and this is what he says. Come, Moses, I will send you to Pharaoh the king, that you may bring my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. How many of you know the song? Pharaoh, Pharaoh, let my people go. Only a few of you did the na-na-na-nas. If you grew up in Sunday school, you know it. If you didn't, well, you missed some stuff, okay? It's on Spotify. I listened to it with my daughter this week. She was like, what are you preaching on, Dad? I was like, I got a song for you. And so God calls Moses to go to the king and tell the king it's time for these people to be set free. They've been in slavery and been oppressed for too long. I am here to be, and on the mouthpiece of God, they're to be delivered. And Moses was sent as their deliverer. So here he is being called by God to do this. But Moses said to God, who am I, that I should go to Pharaoh, the king, and bring the children of Israel out of Egypt? And this kind of starts us off where we ended last week. Last week we talked about our identity in God. And one of the questions we ask God, and we're looking for identity, is who am I? And where we arrived, I'm going to kind of swing off of that. Where we arrived is the better question. It's not who am I, but whose am I? Who do I belong to? I'm made in the image of God. And we took the moment of first mention when it says that when God created humanity, he made us in his image. And so we have an identity. We're made in his image. We're his sons and his daughters. We're chosen. We are loved. We are called. And so we know that. But here is Moses asking a popular question that many of us have asked, who am I? And this is the first excuse that we often face. And really this excuse kind of comes down to this: insecurity. It settles on this idea of like, I'm not really confident. I'm not really sure. I'm a little bit insecure. And as we see in Moses, and we see this actually throughout the Bible, is that God often chooses the most unlikely candidates to fulfill his work and mission on the earth. He does this, I think, just to prove that he is God. When God takes someone like me and puts them in a position right here, I think that says, I am God. God is saying, I am God. My parents are great Christian people. They love the word. They've been in church. I grew up in church, grew up in Sunday school, had a very blessed life, but I am the son of a mechanic. I am not in a lineage of pastors or preachers. And so for God to take someone like me and to put me somewhere like here, that is God saying, I'm God. I pick who I pick, and I put them where I put, and I have purposes on people, and I want to use them. And I think my dad, who's a mechanic, would actually say the same thing. I think he would say, I grew up this way, but God chose for me to do this. And if you knew my dad, you would knew that being a mechanic is just a facade for ministry. He prays for people. He's generous to people. I've seen him fix people's cars, single moms and people who are struggling, and missionaries. And I've seen him be so incredibly, the mechanic is just a facade for the purposes of God. And so I think any one of us can look at our own lives and go, if it weren't for God, I would not be doing this. But because of God, I'm doing this, and look what he's doing. And this is what God loves to do. In fact, I'll show you this. It's all through the Bible. Abraham was too old. God said, I'm going to give you a son. Abraham was 100 years old. Elijah was suicidal. He sat under a tree and said, I don't know if I even want to live anymore. Joseph was abused by his brothers, beat up, thrown in a pit, and sold into slavery. Job went bankrupt. Gideon was a coward, hiding in a wine press, trying to make food for just himself, not even his family. Samson, we learned last week, was a womanizer. Rahab was a prostitute. David was an adulterer. Noah was a drunk, and you are fill in the blank. Don't say it out loud. We don't all want to know. But what are you? What's the thing that's keeping you from walking in the purposes of God? The reality is we all have a blank. You are blank. And here's what I would tell you. Great. You are whatever you are. well, that makes you a likely candidate for God to do some supernatural things through. God loves to do incredible things through broken people. So God didn't accept this excuse from Moses, and actually Moses has 4 excuses. God didn't accept any of them. I don't think he's going to accept it from us either. So what's the answer? What is God's response to Moses? Exodus chapter 3, verse 12. So God said, but I will be with you. You don't think you're enough. You don't think this. You got these insecurities. That's okay. I'm with you, Moses. And this shall be a sign for you that I've sent you when you have brought the people out of Egypt. You shall serve God on this mountain. Not only am I here with you now, not only am I going to be with you when you go to Pharaoh and you go and you confront him and you say, let my people go. I'm going to be with you when you go all the way back and you're back here. I was here now. I'm there then. I'm going to be back right here. I am with you. This journey that I'm taking you on, I'm going to walk with you. And this is such good for us in our insecurities to know that even though I might not be great, I may not be good, that God is with me. And that's the answer. Number 1, God is with you. What we're asked to do by God, we are never asked to do alone. He doesn't give us a calling and a purpose and say, good luck, and I'll check back in a week. He wants to walk with us. God is relational. He wants to be with us. He wants to speak to us. He is with us. So God kind of doubles down on this, and Moses is still in this conversation with them. And Moses said to God, what if I go to the people of Israel, and they say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you. And they ask me, what is his name? What shall I say to them? So this insecurity, like, really, God, me, and even if I do this, and they ask me, who sent me? Like, what's going on? What am I supposed to say to them? And God said to Moses, I am who I am. Talking about identity last week, talking about who am I, and this is what God says. You might have some questions and some struggles and some insecurities in your identity, but I do not. I am who I am. This is why we want to ask the question, not who I am, who am I, but whose am I? And God says this, say this to the people of Israel, I am has sent me to you. Only God can say that. I am sent you. It doesn't even not even a name. It's just I am. Like, that's a strong, confident statement. God also said to Moses, say this to the people of Israel, the Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, the start of this nation, all of this I'm the God of all of this, and I sent you. This is my name forever, and thus I am to be remembered throughout all the generations. What does this tell us? This tells us that who we are has very little to do with what God has called us to do. While we're often trying to find our own identities and our own names and our own namesake, and wouldn't it feel good if my name was on a desk, or if my name was on an office, or if my name was on an achievement or award, or got my name on that degree, or I got to share that name with that special someone to get married to. We're always concerned about our name, and God's concerned about his fame. Like, I am. And Moses is like, what about me? He's like, don't worry about that. Like, what I'm going to do through you, people won't even know you. They're going to know me. It's so big and it's so great, and I just need someone who's willing to go, and I want to do something great. It's not for our gain, but for his fame. What's the second excuse? Second excuse is this, Exodus 4. Then Moses answered, that they will not believe me. So, okay, I'm going to go and I'm going to tell them, I am sent me. But they're not going to believe me. They're not going to listen to my voice, for they will say, the Lord did not appear to you. Here's excuse number 2. The NIV, the translation says this, what if they? What if they don't believe me? And the excuse is this, it's a fear, it's based out of fear. What if they? You know, it takes the voice of God to call someone out from this farm life, this shepherding life, to the position of leading a rebellion against the greatest power on the earth of that day. You ever consider what God was asking Moses to do? It wasn't just going and saying, hey, if you don't mind, all these people, these millions of people who you're building this nation on the backs of your economy, and these people that you've oppressed for over 400 years, will you just let them go like that? What God was asking Moses to do was lead a rebellion. To go to the king and look him dead in the eye and say, how you've built this thing is no more. In fact, God is rebuking that, and God is delivering his people. And so you can imagine Moses having some fear. Now, if you consider that, yeah, okay, that's a lot to do, to look the king in the eye and say, you need to let my people go. But if you consider this, that Moses had actually already blown his opportunity to do this in an easier path. Moses, If you know the story of Moses, if you do, great. If you don't, I'm going to catch you up. The king recognized that the Israelites were growing in such great numbers. And he said this, I want to kill every baby that's been born, every baby boy. What is he trying to do? He's trying to get rid of an entire generation, a genocide. So he makes this order. We got to quit these people. We got to keep these people from multiplying. It's like the movie Ants, Bug's Life, yeah. Where the grasshoppers, like if the ants ever knew they way outnumber the grasshoppers, it would be bad. And so they got to keep them under. That's exactly what Pharaoh was feeling. We got to make sure they know that we're stronger. So let's kill all these baby boys. Moses' mom doesn't buy it. She's like, not doing it. Her name's Miriam. She takes her son, wraps him up, puts him in a basket, sends him down the river. Who picks him up? The king's daughter, Pharaoh's daughter. She picks him up and she decides, I'm going to raise him. But she's like the Kardashians. She's not actually going to raise the baby. She's going to hire people to raise the baby, right? Those who watch the Kardashians, you know what I'm talking about. They're not raising their kids. They hire people to raise their kids. And so she's like, I got to hire someone. So what ends up happening through the grace and sovereign election of God, all of a sudden Moses' mom is the one who ends up getting to raise Moses. How beautiful is that? That God rescues him and then he puts the mom back. So while Moses is being raised in the king's palace with education, learning languages, learning poetry, eating good food, learning the cultures, learning the arts, learning all these things, he's also got his mom telling him, this is who you are. You're an Israelite. You're a son of God. God has chosen you. He's appointed you. He's positioned you. And so Moses knows this. He knows that he's one man left out of an entire generation of boys. One. God saved one. So Moses is probably carrying this calling with some weight. And one day, it says he's walking around and he sees an Egyptian master beating one of his Israelites, someone he was related to, someone he knew, part of his people group. And he gets so filled with rage, he goes and he murders that man. And so Moses goes on the lam. So when God tells Moses, I want you to go back, I want you to know what he's going back to. Not to just confront a king. He's going back to a place that if this was a Western, there'd have been wanted posters. This guy killed somebody. We've been looking for him for 40 years. Where's he at? So when you think about what God is asking Moses to do, fear is an appropriate response. If I show up there, not only may never get to express myself in front of the king, I may also see my people, the Israelites, and they'll be like, you bailed on us. God set you up. You're in the king's house and you blew it because you couldn't keep your anger under control. And then so the king might kill me, the Israelites might kill me. And so fear is an appropriate response. And I think for us sometimes when God asks us to do things, fear is an appropriate, like we're like, God, really? Oh my goodness. What's that going to cost? What happens if I step out? And so we consider these things. These things start to weigh on us. And I love what God tells him. And this is such a great response, a great reminder for us when we think about this and the weight of fear hits us. The Lord said to him, what's in your hand? Moses said, a staff. He said, throw it on the ground. So Moses takes a staff, he throws it on the ground, and it became a serpent. And Moses has an appropriate response here too. He ran from the snake. If you see a snake, run from it, take a bat to it, get a shovel, get a gun. This is an appropriate response right here, right? Someone asked me the other day, now what's the difference between like a good snake and a bad snake? I said, they're all the same if they're dead, right? I don't like snakes. And so Moses, he throws a staff down, turns to the snake, he's like, hey. And this is what God says. God tells him, he says, Lord, hey, take out your hand and catch it by the tail. Pick that thing back up. Boy, don't run away from that. He says, so he put out his hand and he caught it, and it became a staff in his hand. And then in verse 5, it says, why did we do this? What's the point of this? God tells them, that they may believe that the Lord, the God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob has appeared to you. Here's the answer. When we have fear, when we're wondering, really, me, God, are you calling me to step out to that? You have what you need to do what he's called you to. You already have it. Another way to say this is that all God needs is what you have in your hand to do what he's put in your heart. We think, God, how in the world, fear becomes crippling. How am I going to step out and do this? God, what are the tools? What are the resources? How in the world? God, how are you, you're calling us to plant a church. How are we supposed to do it? How am I supposed to raise money? How are we supposed to do this? How am I supposed to show up to a town or a city I don't know anybody and just start something? Fear is an appropriate response. And maybe you felt that and even just stepping out in small things. Maybe stepping out, showing up to a small group. I don't know any of these people. What if they don't like me? What if I go to the wrong apartment apartment? What if I knock on the wrong door? Like fear becomes crippling. And I think oftentimes God is like, I've already given you the tools you need. They're in your hands. The things I've asked you to do, I've already given it to you. What God has called you to, he's going to carry you through. And so God tells him, he says, this is in your hand. And I think sometimes we're looking for like a tool or a resource. Like, God, if you would just do this, or if you would just give me this, then I'll do that. Like, we kind of work this barter with God. And here's what God is saying. I just want to use what's already in you. Like, you're looking for an extra thing. You're looking to get better at something, a skill or a craft. And he's like, I'm just looking for someone who'll take a step. I'm just looking for something who's faithful enough to say, I'll take what's in my hands and I'll start following you, God. God, I'm not sure how I'm going to do this, but I trust that if you've asked me to do it, you're going to see me through it. And so, God, I'm going to take what you've put in my hands and I'm just going to start taking some steps and I'm going to start following you and see what happens. If you keep reading this, God gives him a few more miracles. It's an incredible story. And so, let's look at the third excuse. Third excuse here, Exodus 4, verse 10. But Moses said to the Lord, "Oh, my Lord, I am not eloquent, either in the past or since you have spoken to your servant." So he said, even when I was growing up, even when I was in the Pharaoh's household, and like there was other people who were better at speaking, but I'm slow of speech and of tongue. He says, I am not. And so this is the third excuse for us. I am not. And there's many different blanks for many of us. I am not what? Well, really what it comes down to is a feeling of inadequacy. I'm not good enough. I'm not sharp enough. I'm not tall enough. I can't speak well enough. I don't have enough resources. God, I am not. And some Bible teachers have said that Moses had a speech impediment or a stutter. In fact, that's what I believed until about a year and a half ago. We're teaching through the book of Acts. And as we're teaching through Acts, I stumbled upon a verse in Acts chapter 7, and this is what Paul had to say about Moses. He said, and Moses was instructed in all the wisdom of the Egyptians. So we talked about that. He was raised in Pharaoh's house, he would have known poetry. He would have been this great education. And he was mighty in his words and deeds. How is it that he's not good with his words and also mighty with his words? How is it that he's slow to speech and not eloquent, but also yet mighty? Is this a typo? Is the Bible inaccurate? No, I think what we see here, and if you look at the context of the whole conversation, you start to see this, that often what God has called you to do, he's even gifted you to do it, but the enemy wants to perverse that gift. He wants to reverse the gift. He wants to convince you that the very thing God's calling you to use, you shouldn't use. The very thing that God's calling you to do, you shouldn't do. It's the work of the enemy. What he's trying to do, and this is it, the enemy wants you to be impotent. He wants you to know and feel called by God, but do nothing. He wants you to feel and sense, to desire the purpose of God. He's okay with you being passionate and having good intentions, just as long as you don't act on them. And this is what I believe Moses is. God is calling him to use his voice to speak to the king, to see that the people would be delivered. That's a mighty, powerful voice, and ultimately lead people for 40-something years in the desert with his voice, with his leadership. Yet in this moment, he goes, I'm not good with my voice. I'm not sure I can get in front of people and speak. Maybe even had a fear of public speaking. Maybe that's a more accurate depiction of that. Maybe he was scared to get in front of people, and maybe he felt inadequate in some ways. But in this, I think I want to go back to last week. We had a statement that we said together a few times, and I think we need to go back to that again because I think I need to convince you of this. And it's this: the devil is a liar. The devil is a liar. In fact, we say that together today. Say, the devil is a liar. One more time. The devil is a liar. And this is what he's doing. He's twisting this inadequacy sets inside of him. But what God has created with purpose, Moses, you today, the enemy wants to crush with his perversion. He wants to twist the gift. He wants to cause insecurity and inadequacy and fears. What God is calling you to, he's trying to do anything he can for you not to step into it. In fact, I believe that as Christians, as believers, we're designed to bring life, to bring hope, to bring love into the world. We're called to carry the gospel message on our shoulders and with our voices and with our hands and our feet. And the enemy's number one strategy is to make you impotent, to have the answers, but to not speak it, to not use it, to sit there and know the God of the universe, to know that Christ gave his life and that there is hope and that there is a future and that there is healing, and for you to know all those things, but to not speak them. And this is what he was trying to do with Moses. Moses had this unique connection, this unique conversation with God. And if the enemy could just keep Moses' mouth shut, it would all be okay. And this is a struggle, I believe, that's happening right now in our country, in our city, in our world. I think that the world is flipping upside down. I mean, there's all kinds of crazy stuff happening. Turn on the news, turn on social media. The world is getting crazy. It's broken. There's all kinds of things that are messed up, and there's all kinds of things that you can see that, like, man, just 5 or 6 years ago, we'd have never thought that, yet here we are celebrating it now. Like, the world is in a crazy place, and here's what I believe. I believe that the enemy wants Christians to keep their mouth shut. I think he wants us to keep our mouth, just stay in your little corner. Just do your little thing. Just stay in your little churches. Just keep it right here. Just keep it in a circle when God is calling us to be out there in Egypt as deliverers. He's called us out of our burning bush moment, and he's saying, leave your farm, little house on the prairie life, get out into the Egypt and tell people there is hope. Tell people they don't have to stay bound. Tell people they don't have to stay in their sin. Tell people they don't have to carry their brokenness and their shame anymore. Tell people that there is someone that loves them so much that he gave his life for them, and that there is a way out of Egypt, and there is a promise, but they're going to have to leave where they are and follow Jesus. And I think what God is calling us, he's calling some Moseses, some people who would use their mouths to bring deliverance to people. And we got to be a people who step out. And I love how Martin Luther King Jr. said this. He said, the ultimate tragedy is not the oppression and cruelty by the bad people, but it's the silence over that by good people. Like, we have hope. Let's talk about it, church. Let's get up. Let's get to work. Let's win. Let's plunder hell and fill heaven in Jesus' name until all of Wichita experiences the real Jesus. So here is God's response. He says this. Then God said to him, who has made man's mouth? Who made your mouth? Who made Moses' mouth? God. So God's having this conversation. Did I not do this? Did I not make you this way? Did I not create you? As the psalmist put, aren't you fearfully and wonderfully made? As Jeremiah was put there, weren't you knit together in your mother's womb? Before you were even born, I started putting purposes on your life. And in Ephesians 2, Paul says this, aren't we his workmanship? Meaning he crafted us with purpose and a calling. And so this is the question, didn't I make your mouth? It's the question he asked him. Who makes him mute or deaf or seeing or blind? I can use all those people is what God's saying. You could be mute and I could use you. In fact, if you are mute, I also can make you speak. I can do those kind of things. I'm God. Who makes these people? Is it not I, the Lord? And he says this, so go, Moses. Quit using excuses. I'm tired of your excuses. I've given you a calling. Go, and I will be with your mouth, and I will teach you what you shall speak. Some of us, man, we're this close to sharing our faith with a coworker. We're this close to maybe talking about God in our homes with our families. We're maybe this close to like maybe praying out loud with our wives. We're maybe this close to sharing our faith with a classmate. We're maybe this close to like stepping into the purposes and calling of God, but we're not sure what we would say. I'm not a preacher. I'm not a teacher. What am I supposed to say? John, that's your job. I'll bring him to church. You preach to him. In fact, I'll tell you, I'll make you a deal. You do that, and I will, okay? Bring him to church. I'll preach. We'll give him an opportunity to know Jesus, but that doesn't let you off the hook. I love this. Go, and I will be with your mouth. Sometimes you just need to open your mouth, start telling people, this is what God has done for me. I maybe can't preach this whole thing. I maybe don't understand everything in it, but I do know what God did for me. I do know who I used to be, and I do know when I met Jesus, and now I know what I am and who I am. And so let me just tell you about that. And they start, well, what about this? Or what about that doctrine? I don't know. Come to church. I got a pastor. I'll ask him. But this is what I know. Some of us, we just need to start speaking. God wants to use your mouth to change someone else, to bring deliverance and healing. And I believe this is what God is saying. This is the answer to Moses right here. He's saying, I created you, so trust me. Trust me. Trust me. Trust that I have a purpose for your life. Who made your mouth? In other words, I made it, I purpose it. I created it, I purpose it. Do you believe that God created you? Question in the room. How many of you believe that God created you? If God created you, I want you to know this. Everyone who raised their hand today, he purposed you. He has a purpose for you. He has a calling for you. God is saying, I can use you. Last excuse. Number 4. Moses says this, oh my God, please send someone else. I think that's exactly how he said it too. I don't think you're hearing me, God. There's got to be someone else. Are you sure? Me. And honestly, I've prayed this exact same prayer before. About 5 years ago, me and my wife were spending some time with a coach, a counselor in our life. His name was Doug, and we're trying to decide what our next step was going to be. We had to be on staff at a church for 14 years, and I felt like God was kind of stirring our hearts to pastoring, to preaching, and to being more involved in those things. And I was getting to preach, 7, 8 sermons a year at our church, and then some midweek Bible studies. And so I was getting to preach some, and we were leading small groups. I was over small groups and start hearing some things like that, some assimilation things. So I was getting to connect with people. I felt like God was stirring us to something more. I just didn't know what that meant. My pastor kept telling me, you should plant a church. And I kept telling him, heaven, no. What does heaven no mean? It sounds like what that means is even if God tells me no, I'm a Jonah with Nineveh right now. That is not God's plan or purposes for my life. There's got to be something else. There's got to be someone else. And so he, along with several other people, were kind of speaking these things in my life, and I was kind of like struggling with it. So we went to spend some time with the coach and counselor. After a day and a half with him, he looks at me and goes, John, what's the hang up? It seems like as we've looked at your story and we've talked through your past, we've talked through this, it seems like this is what God's calling you to do. Other people have spoken it. Your wife, she's sitting, my wife Stephanie was sitting with me. She's speaking it. What's keeping you from saying God is calling us to plant a church? And I said, well, I guess it's fear. Just the fear of the unknown. How am I going to provide for my family? How do I step into something new? I'm comfortable where I am. And we just kind of got the house in the cul-de-sac with the HOA pool. Literally all those things. Man, we've arrived. And now I found out those things are pretty normal here in Kansas. But in Arkansas, that was very unique. And so I was it felt comfortable, and God was kind of turning me. And I said, I don't know. I guess it's fear. And he looked at my wife, Stephanie, and says, hey, Stephanie, is John a very fearful person? And she goes, no. And I said, thank you. Threw me under the bus. And he goes, I don't think, you don't seem like a very fearful person. She's like, no, he's an idiot. He'll do anything. Someone's like, here, try this. He doesn't even ask what it is. He just puts it in his mouth and eats it. He's like, that's pretty good. And they're like, it's octopus. Oh, okay, cool. He just does stuff. He's not fearful at all. He'll try new things. He'll take risk. He kind of almost seems a little bit addicted to some of these things and likes the adrenaline of something new. It's not fear. And I'm like, well, dang it, I'm broken. I don't know what's wrong with me. Because fear seemed like the obvious. That seemed like planting a church, that's hard. Fear is it. And so we stopped. He said, let's take a break. Let's eat lunch. So we're sitting there. My wife and him are eating lunch. They're having a great conversation. And I'm sitting there going, what's wrong with me? Literally. I thought it was fear, but it's not fear. So why can I not say, I feel like this call is in my heart, but why can't I say it out of my mouth? What's keeping me from taking this step of faith and serving the Lord? And I was sitting there, and all of a sudden the Spirit of the Lord brought this story and this conversation of Moses to my heart. And as I started kind of just sitting there, and I was just kind of replaying the conversation and all these Moses' excuses, and I realized this. I realized that I was using this last one. Is there not someone else? I was sitting there thinking, God, I kind of sense that you're calling me to this, but my buddy Josh, man, he prays way more than I do. The dude prays 5, 6 hours a day. I don't pray as much as him. And then I started thinking, I was like, what about, preaching? If I'm going to be a pastor, I have to preach quite a bit. My buddy Chad, man, he's a great preacher. He's a great preacher, and he preaches way better than I do. I started thinking about that. It's like, okay, my buddy Jacob, man, he's a lot smarter than me. He's a lawyer that now turned into a pastor. This dude's brilliant. He is way smarter than me. I started thinking about, man, it's going to take a lot to raise money, raising the funds to start a church. My friend Jason, man, he raised almost $1 million to plant a church. $750,000. I can't do that. And so I started thinking through all these things, and all of a sudden I realized I was praying this prayer, God, send someone else, but it was also based in insecurity. And I didn't realize until that moment that you could be confident and insecure at the same time. I'll take a risk, but that doesn't mean I'm not also in the back of my mind going, there's a lot of people better than me. Are you sure, God? Me? If it's time to go, I'm going to step up and go. I had confidence. If you put me in charge of something, I'm going to go. I'm going to act like I know what I'm doing, even if I don't. Let's go. That's my personality. Like, let's just go. Let's go after it. But in the back of my mind, I'm also sitting there thinking, man, I might not be the best guy for this. And so I had this tension of confidence and insecurity, and then this reluctancy of, God, is there not anyone else? And the Spirit of God in that moment, I remember he said something very clear to me. He said, I've called and purposed Moses. I've called and I purposed you. Plant a church. And the way that God said that, I said it very nice to you today, but the way he said it to me was very directional. It was almost like a father saying, come on, idiot. And in fact, I'll show you. This is kind of similar to how here's excuse, reluctance, use someone else. But here's the scripture. This is almost how God spoke to me here. Then the anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses, and he said, is there not an Aaron? Like I felt like God was kind of correcting me. And so when he said that, when he kind of came at me like that, all of a sudden I knew in my heart, I need to do what I have two choices here. It's to obey or disobey. I'm going to serve the Lord with my life and going to give him everything I have, even if I feel insecure, even if I feel inadequate, even if I have some fears, even if there's some reluctancy. I'm going to choose to obey or I'm going to disobey. I came to a crossroads that I had a clear call from God, and I had two choices, obey or disobey. And I'm proud to say, obviously, you're here today. Me and my wife, we obeyed. And we stopped right there in that moment. The Spirit of God fell in that place. It was a holy place. While we're doing charts and all kinds of things, all kinds of leadership stuff, I started weeping before the Lord because I realized I'm not okay, yet he still wants to use me. I've got things I need to work on, yet he says, I'm not waiting on that. I've got purposes for you now. And so we stopped, me and my wife and Doug, our friend, and we wrote this down on February 12th, 2019. This is the first time I've ever shared this publicly. And it said, this is what we said. Our decision is to say yes to God's calling and leadership's confirmation to plant a church. The next weekend, we were in Wichita praying, asking God, is this the place you'd send us? When God spoke clearly, I said yes. Now, I had some reluctancy. I had some insecurities. I felt inadequate, still do at times. I still look at myself in the mirror and I go, God, are you sure me? Are you sure you don't want to send someone else? Are you sure? Like, is this it? But here's what I want you to know today, and I want you to understand this today. And I love this verse here, is that what God has asked us to do, he's never asked us to do alone. First point was this, the answer is that God is with you. I want to show you one more thing. This is what God told Moses. Is there not Aaron, your brother, the Levite? I know that he can speak well. Behold, he is coming to meet you. How is he already coming to meet you? I'll tell you how. Before God ever spoke to Moses, he spoke to Aaron. He said, I know that the calling I have for you, and I know you're going to need some other people in your life to do it with. And this is a great relief to us because not only is God calling us and he's going to be with us, he's calling us and he's called other believers to do this with you. You don't have to go out there and save the world on your own. You don't have to go out there and win your coworker on your own. While you're planting seed, Apollos is watering. That's what the scripture says. Paul planted the seed, Apollos watered, and God caused the growth. We're not out there on our own. You're just doing your part. You're just doing what God's called you to do. The question is this: will you obey? If God is calling on you, will you serve? Will you say yes to the call of God on your life? You might not be okay, but guess what? He specializes in taking ordinary, not so great people and doing extraordinary great things through them. And why does he do that? Because when he does that, it proves that it's not us, it's just God. It proves that he exists, that he is strong, that he is mighty, that he is powerful, and that he is loving. If you can do it on your own, it's probably not of God. But when you do something and you take a step and you do something that goes beyond yourself, beyond your gifting, beyond your potential, this is what it does. It points all the way back to God, and it says God is sovereign, God is kind, and he chose to do something great through someone like that. And that's how I feel every time I get up here to preach on Sunday. I'm not good enough, but God, somehow you took something that I said and you did something in their hearts. God, thank you for using me. In fact, often before I step out there, I say, God, thank you for using me. It's a privilege to serve you because I recognize that I'm not that good, but God chose me and I'm just trying to do the best that I can. And I promise if some of you today will get a hold of that, God has purposes for you. If you just take a yes and take a step, God will do some incredible things in your life. God's not asking you to do it alone. When Queen Elizabeth II was crowned, when she was crowned, or set to be crowned, as queen, she sent an invitation to all her subjects, all the people that she was choosing to be present, government officials, royalty, people in the military, even some common, ordinary people were invited. She had this list, just like anyone would. Hey, come to my coronation. Come to this moment where I'm going to be made queen of England. And so at the end of her address, her note that she sent out, it's a famous note. And this invitation, it wasn't really an invitation because here was the last thing it said before her seal was on it. It said, all excuses ceasing. You've been invited, but your excuses won't work here. You better be here. Are you sick? Show up. You get a flat tire on the way? You better patch that thing. Get back on the road. Come on. And this is what she was saying is like, I've got something important and I want you to be a part of it and I don't want any excuses. And how much more so is the work that I believe that Christ is calling us to be a part of? How much more so is the opportunity to serve the Lord? And so this is my challenge to you guys today. My challenge to you, sorry, there's that blank, but my challenge to you is this, no more excuses.